Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. And the topic of this 10-minute moan, I'm going to have a bit of a deeper dive into the history of the Fabian Society and consider one of the darkest periods and how and why that should concern the people of today. Now, this chapter is one of the most disgraceful chapters in the history of the Fabian Society, a group that's cloaked in elitism, authoritarianism, with ambitions in the guise of socialism. The Fabians were founded in 1884. I've done recently a great interview with Stephen Barrett, and that's went down really well. I'll link it to the end of this video for anyone that hasn't seen it. And the Fabians were founded in 1884, claimed to champion progress, but their advocacy for eugenics and social engineering reveals a sinister truth. They were not saviours of the working class, but architects of a chilling vision to control and reshape humanity itself. Now, this is not a story of misguided elitism. It's a story of intellectual arrogance, moral bankruptcy, and betrayal of the very principles they pretended to uphold. Let us unmask the Fabians and condemn this legacy for what it truly is. Now, the Fabian Society, named after a Roman general, known for his cunning delays, prided itself in its slow and deliberate path to socialism. Communism, if you like. They rejected revolution, favouring instead creeping bureaucratic takeover of society by so-called experts. Their influence in British Labour Party and modern welfare systems is undeniable. Don't be fooled by their polished image. Beneath the rhetoric of fairness lurks a vile obsession with eugenics and pseudoscience notion that humanity could be improved by weeding out the unfit through controlled breeding and social engineering, the manipulative restructuring of society to suit their elitist needs. They were not peripheral ideas, they were central to the Fabians' vision of their socialist communist dystopia. Now, start with eugenics, a movement that should make any decent person recoil. Eugenics was about deciding who was worthy of life and reproduction and who was not. It targeted the poor, the disabled, the mentally ill, anyone the Fabians deemed a burden on their perfect society. And make no mistake, the Fabians were not passive bystanders. They were advocates. Sidney Webb, co-founder of the London School of Economics, and his wife Beatrice were obsessed with managing population growth, dismissing the working classes as a biological menace that threatened the utopian dreams. Their writings drip with contempt for the very people they claim to represent, advocating policies to limit the reproduction of those they saw as inferior. This wasn't compassion, it was cold, calculated elitism. Then there's George Bernard Shaw, the Fabian playwright, whose wit could mask his moral rot. In 1910, Shaw had the audacity to suggest the society could decide who deserves to live, even proposing, half-serious, he claimed that the unfit could be painlessly disposed of. Painless for who? Certainly not the victims of such a monstrosity of an idea. H.G. Wells, another Fabian luminary, shared the vile vision, dreaming of a world where science would purge humanity of inferior traits. They were not idle musings. They were deliberate calls for a system that would dehumanise millions, all in the name of progress. The Fabians' embracement of eugenics wasn't a minor misstep. It was a deliberate, shameful plunge into authoritarianism. What makes this betrayal even more galling is the Fabians' hypocrisy. They positioned themselves as the champions of the downtrodden, yet their policies targeted the most vulnerable. They spoke of equality while plotting to divide humanity into the fit and the unfit. Their vision of social engineering went beyond eugenics, envisaging a state where every aspect of life, education, work, family would be controlled by an intellectual elite The Fabians didn't trust the people they claimed to serve. They saw them as raw material to be moulded or discarded by their enlightened hands. This wasn't socialism. This was tyranny, dressed in a progressive rhetoric. The Fabians' ideals had real-world consequences. We must not shy away from their ugliness. Their advocacy of eugenics fueled policies like compulsory sterilisation, which took root in places like the United States and Scandinavia, stripping countries of countless individuals of their bodily autonomy. In Britain, their influence shaped debates in public health and welfare, not to empower people but to monitor and control them. The Fabians' fingerprints on a legacy of dehumanisation that paved the way for even darker horrors. While they didn't directly orchestrate the atrocities of the Nazis, their ideas contributed to an intellectual climate that normalised treating people as disposable. By the 1930s, as eugenics' true evils became undeniable, the Fabians quickly slunk away from their once proud stance, hoping history would forget their complicity. We must not let them off so easily. Let's be clear, the Fabians' defenders might argue that they were products of their time, swept up in a popular movement. This excuse is pathetic. The Fabians weren't naive followers, they were leaders, using their prestige to push a dangerous agenda. Eugenics wasn't a universal consensus. Many socialists, like Emily Pankhurst, rejected it outright, seeing it for a betrayal of what it was. The Fabians chose to embrace it, driven by their unshakable belief in their own superiority. Their faith in experts like themselves blinded them to the human cost of their ideas. They weren't misguided, they were arrogant, willing to sacrifice the marginalised on the altar for their utopian fantasies. Why does this matter now? Because the Fabians' legacy is a warning we can't ignore. Their obsession with control, whether eugenics or social engineering, lives on in modern debates about technology, genetic manipulation, and state power. When we hear of optimising society or managing populations, we should hear echoes of the Fabians' hubris. Their failure wasn't just a historical blunder, it was a more moral catastrophe. It was a moral catastrophe that exposed the dangers of unchecked intellectual elitism. They betrayed the working class, the disabled, and anyone who didn't fit in their narrow vision of progress. Their socialism was a sham, a veneer for their desire to dominate and reshape humanity to their liking. As we reflect this shameful history, let's not be swayed by the Fabians' contributions to welfare or education. These achievements cannot whitewash their sins. The Fabian Society's advocacy of eugenics and social engineering was the deliberate choice to prioritise control over compassion, elitism over equality. They were not heroes of progress, but architects of a chilling vision that devalued human lives. We must condemn them unequivocally, not just for what they did, but for what they represent. The peril of trusting those who claim to know what's best for us all. Let their legacy serve as a stark reminder. True progress respects every individual's dignity, not the cold calculations of an intellectual elite. The Fabians failed that test, and history must hold them accountable. Now, why is this so important today? Well, let me ask you something. You can't just argue that this was something that a society done 80, 90 years ago and try and forgive and forget. Because let me ask you a question. If Adolf Hitler's old party was to come about today, would you be able to say, no, I can join that today? Because we must just forget their past. Or does their past forge what they are today and in the future? And then you need to consider, who are today's Fabians? How many of our cabinet, how many of our leaders are Fabians? And how many of them are not fully paid up card-holding members, but even members of other parties out with the Labour Party that try and mould our nation and indeed our world. I mean, you consider some of the bonkers policies in politics of the last decade where we try and decide that a man can become a woman can become a man. We consider the universal type of schooling that's forced upon our children and how that would affect society of the future. You need to consider things like the bill to allow people to kill themselves and how that can affect the future. Very, very similar to the fit and the unfit, where we should just get rid of the unfit. This policy has got Fabian written all over it. And the chaos that these people wouldn't care about as long as it gives them the society they dream of. We have to be wary of the Fabians. And I have got some people ask me, what was the spur? What was it that made you decide I want to look into Fabians? Well, there's two things happened in my private life, which I'm not at liberty to discuss right now. But when the time is right, I will tell the whole story and how three characters came into my life and how possibly they might try to affect it. And at least 2 out of the 3 characters are members of the Fabian Society. That'll be some story. However, if you've not subscribed to the channel, please do so. If you like this video and you want others to see it, please hit the like, put some comments below and hit the share button. But most importantly of all, unless you're the type of person that tries to tell us everything you do is for the betterment of society, and the reality is vastly different, then not you. But everyone else, have a great day. Cheery bye now.